Get Kevin Pelton into the conversation. A lot going on. NBA playoffs. The draft lottery is set. Kevin has an interesting scenario over at ESPN.com. We'll bring him into the conversation that we've been having. Kevin, over the weekend, the Rookie of the Year candidates. A lot of discussion on Embiid, whether he should be considered for his 31 games. Would you vote for Joel Embiid based on just 31 games?
So I definitely thought he should be considered based on that. I mean, the way I approached it is, pretty much the same I would any award, which is kind of the value you created as compared to a replacement level player. And obviously, given that it was such a relatively weak rookie class, and he was so good when he was on the court, playing at about an all-star level this year, and the time he did play it, I certainly thought he was in consideration. And I thought most of the year I was going to vote for him, but then ultimately I thought Malcolm Brogdon played well enough down the stretch that I decided to put him first on my ballot.
So you went with Malcolm Brogdon. Now, see, I think that's interesting because my campaign for Embiid would be centered around the fact that these other guys, Dario Saric, another one who had a 25-game stretch that put him into the conversation. But then you're really only looking at him based on those 25 games. Brogdon, same thing. They didn't have the impact, and I think the field not being very strong, the impact and the historical influence, I think, basically says this is a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation type of season we saw. That's why he would get my vote.
Yeah, I think that's certainly reasonable. I mean, if you do feel like Rookie of the Year should kind of default a little bit more to just who is the best player rather than value to your team, because, honestly, most of these guys are not very valuable to their team as rookies, then that also would be a case for Embiid.
All right, let's take a look at some other rookie possibilities. We know the Sixers now have the number 3 overall pick in the draft. So, Kevin Pelton, we asked our listeners, stay at 3, trade up, maybe try to get Fultz or Ball, or trade down. What's the best scenario for Brian Colangelo?
So I don't think that trade up is probably going to be realistic, unless the Lakers aren't in love with Lonzo Ball and really are kind of indifferent between those 2 point guards and don't mind between him and De'Aaron Fox, I guess, and don't mind moving back to 3rd. I don't see Boston trading down because there's been a lot. I was actually surprised how much talk there was about that because the Celtics already have plenty of players, plenty of young players and picks on the way. It doesn't seem much like the Sixers, like they're necessarily in need of more of those. It's really about the quality instead of the quantity. So failing that, I mean, despite what I just said, I would be very interested in looking at trading down because I'm not in love with Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum. I don't think Malik Monk is a dramatically worse prospect, and he clearly is the best fit for the Sixers. So if you could move back a couple of spots, still get Monk and pick up something else, that would be my plan A.
So if the Sixers, were to get a couple of, I saw over at ESPN.com, Kevin Pelton's with us, you suggested Orlando, a team that has multiple picks. You think it's better off taking 2 picks, even though one of them is a little deeper, 25, I think it was. That's a better scenario than staying with the 3rd best player?
Yeah, just because I think that, maybe drafting Monk is the best thing the Sixers could do at 3. And, if you're able to pick up anything and still get down and get that same guy, then I think that's probably the way to go.
So if they stood at 3, give me your thoughts on who you think the best fit is there.
I mean, it certainly might be Monk. I mean, he makes a lot of sense for what the Sixers need. And again, I'm just not that enamored of Jackson and Tatum as prospects. Jackson has the questions about how his shot will translate, shot well from 3 late in the season, but very poorly from the free throw line, which tends to be a slightly better indicator than three-point percentage of how guys are going to shoot from 3 in the NBA based on my research. Tatum, to me, I just don't see that special skill with him that would make him a top 3 guy. I actually, more than them, tend to prefer Jonathan Isaac from Florida State, who I think, projects much more clearly as a solid role player in the league, therefore, has a little bit less downside than those guys, and still has plenty of upside given his frame and athletic potential.
Yeah, the one guy, Fultz, do you like him clearing away as the number 1 prospect in this draft? Are you on that wagon? I know you're up in that neck of the woods.
Well, I'm a pretty big Ball believer, given what he did last year at the collegiate level where, he was one of the best players in college basketball and I think a more productive player than Fultz at the collegiate level. Fultz is the safer pick because of the fact that he really just doesn't have almost any weaknesses. His game is so well-rounded from that standpoint that I think he's very likely to be a good player in the league. Ball, there's a much greater downside risk because of the fact that, he wasn't really a pick-and-roll player at UCLA. He's got questions about how he's able to shoot off the dribble with that unorthodox form, but I think his upside is higher. So it kind of depends on the team for me. With Boston, I do kind of prefer Fultz for them.
Kevin, how would you see Ball fitting in with Ben Simmons?
I think that could be a good fit because I actually like Ball a lot playing off, pun intended, the ball, because of what I was talking about, that inability to shoot off the dribble, I think is going to make it a little challenging for him to operate as kind of that traditional pick-and-roll point guard that most teams in the league are, building their offense around. But I think, he does have the ability to catch and shoot from the NBA line and well beyond it. And then I think his passing ability, because he sees the court incredibly, I think that's going to be more valuable to him in transition and then kind of playing on the weak side, getting the ball swung to him and finding the right teammate out of that. So I think him and Simmons could make sense together from that standpoint.
Hey, Kevin, we've had a lot of people come on the show, and you're starting to hear a little bit more about J.J. Redick. You think he's a fit for Philadelphia?
He's certainly older than I would be looking to go, but if you're, in terms of, again, that fit of guys they need, brings a lot of shooting. Obviously, the ability to come off of screens and create open looks that way. I think he would fit well next season with Simmons. If he's going to be the guy at point guard. The question is just how much money you're investing in over how many years, given that he's in his 30s.
Kevin Pelton with us, ESPN.com, NBA insider. I want to look at the games real fast. We do have games still going on. We're not at the finals quite yet, but what that game last night, does it change Boston's view of this offseason at all? I mean, Isaiah Thomas obviously doesn't play. They win. Smart kind of changes his role a little bit. Do they take that into account at all?
I don't think so. I mean, if they could count on Marcus Smart making 7 threes a night, that would change their outlook. But that is certainly not his usual reputation and MO from 3-point range. And I think that was kind of an example of they got hot from 3. Cleveland pulled off the throttle defensively. I think that's what added up to this win more so than really saying that the Celtics have found something.
So Boston still just says, all right, we got Isaiah, we got Avery Bradley, we got Smart, we still go Fultz.
That's what I expect from them because I think they're making this decision based not on who's going to help them the most next season, but who's going to help them the most 3 or 4 seasons down the line. And by that point, Bradley and Thomas will both have been free agents. It would be a little surprising to me if both those guys end up coming back to Boston. And, even if they do, at some point you could look to trade them and make room for Fultz as he starts to develop and become a starting caliber player.
Kevin Pelton's with us. Kevin, any reason to think that the Spurs pull out a win tonight? How different of a series is it with Kawhi and Parker?
Kawhi in particular, I think night and day, and sort of his absence has exacerbated the loss of Tony Parker because now you don't have a lot of guys who can create offense for you. Manu Ginobili has been good for them at times, and Jonathan Simmons has done a nice job of stepping up in that role, but now they would need Parker's ability to do that, whereas Patty Mills kind of worked well playing off of Kawhi when he was healthy. But yeah, I mean, I think they certainly would have won game 1. I don't think it would be surprising if they would have won at least one of the 2 games in San Antonio, and we'd be looking at maybe a 6 or 7 game series at this point, a real competitive series. You know that the Spurs are going to play hard, much like the Celtics did last night, despite the long odds against them. But still just seems like the Warriors, they've got that 10-0 spurt in them pretty much whenever they need it.
Was last night's Cavaliers game the NBA saying, hey, LeBron, can you give us an extra game? We don't want to take 10 days off here. Was that their way of trying to extend one extra night for the NBA?
it was very convenient, but given how good the rest has been for LeBron in this year's playoffs, I don't think he would have agreed to it.
Unreal. So we see Boston make it a 2-1 series. Tonight we've got Spurs and Warriors. Series is 3-0, and Kawhi Leonard will not play. Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, NBA insider here on the Sports Bash. Check him out over at K Pelton on Twitter. And, of course, check out that thing on the Sixers trading down in his mailbag over there and see if you agree with Kevin that moving down is the best scenario. Kevin, we always appreciate the time, pal.
All right, sounds good. Look forward to talking to you down the line.